Hello.
Hello. Hi, Roberta.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Is the audio good enough?
Arancha?
No, we're just listening a back sound. Could you please
can't
speak
hear me?
again, Roberta?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Is it good enough, or do I need to put on headphones?
I think it's better to put headphones.
Yeah,
Can you try? Let's make a try with headphones.
Yeah, well, let me see. I'm getting some technical support here. What's it here? That's it? What is going to end? Which one? Just stick right up. Colleagues, can you hear me now? Any better?
Yes, it's better, but we are still listening like a back sound.
Maybe that's the fan. Okay.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yes, we're listening the fan.
Okay. So is it okay now?
Yes, it's much better.
Okay. All right. So we're good to go. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Roberta.
Okay.
We will have the interpreters, but at just 5 minutes to start the session. So let's see if we can have like a little test with them.
Thank you. Yes, that would be great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hello, good morning, good evening. I just see we have 2 more speakers who have joined. So I just wanted to check if we could try the video and the mic of the persons who have joined. And if you could change your name, rename your profile. Thank you for that. Oh, actually 3. Good morning, good evening.
Good day, good evening, good night, everyone. I just want to ask the speakers to rename yourself so that we can all see our names. So you can go to the 3 dots on your right-hand side of your screen and you'll see name, rename option. Please do rename yourself. I see a number of our colleagues are on as still speaker. Hello, Faiza. Good day, Julianne.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. Is this Faiza?
Yes,
Nice to meet you.
same here.
Hello, Youngsook. Good day.
Hello.
Hi, Ambassador. How are you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you well.
Thank you.
Good night, Minister Mounyes.
Hello. Ana Lawrence, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Yes, okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ministra Mounyes, ¿podríamos probar otra vez su sonido?
Hola,
Hola, la escuchamos un poco cortada.
ahora mejor.
No, deme un segundo. ¿Podríamos revisar el sonido si hay algo que le está haciendo interferencia a la ministra, por favor? ¿Nos puede volver a saludar, ministra?
Hola,
Hay algo que le está haciendo eco. ¿Está firmada en su dispositivo móvil o en su laptop?
laptop.
¿Laptop?
Sí,
¿Está conectada al audio de la computadora o de casualidad trae set de headphones?
no al audio de la computadora.
Denos un momento para volver a revisar. Ministra, ¿habrá posibilidad de que use algún set de headphones para ver si mejoramos el sonido?
No, no tengo, solo esta la capacidad que tengo en estos momentos. Trataré de hacer la conexión inestable en estos momentos, pero quizás acá.
Si quiere, sí, esperamos unos minutitos a que vuelva a tener una buena conexión y volvemos a hacer la prueba, ministra. Muchas gracias.
Ok, a las, bueno, como en 40 minutos mejor acá, pero
No, esperemos que sí, sí nos dé tiempo. Vamos a ver, esperar unos minutitos a ver su conexión y esperemos que todo funcione muy bien.
So colleagues, we still have 2 people who are just a speaker, who have not renamed themselves. Can we ask them to do that? Laurence, can you help?
Yes, yes, I can help. Only I cannot put the video on myself, I think. May we ask everyone to put on video? Yes, perfect. And if possible, also to adjust. Oh, I see Anna Falu, welcome.
Roberta, hello everybody.
Thank you for
Hello, my
joining.
darling Anna.
Mm,
Yes,
glad.
so lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you too. Sorry, pardon.
So we have 2 more speakers who have joined but not yet renamed themselves. So if you could kindly do this or put yourself on camera.
Si hay alguien en la sesión que todavía no haya puesto no haya cambiado su nombre, nos apoyarían ya sea cambiándolo o poniendo su cámara para que podamos cambiárselo nosotras. Me parece que hay 2 personas en la sala que aún no cambian su nombre, no podemos ver quiénes son.
Del house, ¿me podrían mandar a galería, porfa, para ver todas las cámaras?
Is Norma Don Juan Pérez with us yet?
Sorry for interrupting. It's Laura from Australia on behalf of Julianne. Is our video working? I can't seem to see it on the screen.
Yes, yes, your video is working fine and your sound is good too.
Thank you very much.
We will wait for everyone to join and to open the cameras. So our final screen will be better with all the cameras, and then we can test. Because
Beautiful.
as soon as you're opening, the software is like shuffled, so, and rearranging. So we will wait for everyone to be with the cameras open.
Could we also kindly ask everyone to rename? Currently, I see Jeevika, thanks. You just did it. Thank you and welcome.
Give me 2 minutes to just set up my mic.
Thank
Good
you.
morning, good evening.
Good morning and good evening.
Buenas tardes, Juany, bienvenida.
Gracias, Ana. Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes. ¿Te podría pedir que cambies tu nombre en pantalla para que podamos ver? Perfecto, muchísimas gracias.
I just want to check whether my voice is heard for you or not.
Yes,
Can you
your
hear
sound
me?
is
Yes,
your
perfect.
sound is
very
working
good.
fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And here it's a bit cold at this time.
Where are
What is
you now?
time? What is the time of your country? In here, Korea, Seoul, it's morning. It's about 30 past to 9 in the morning. What about yours?
In Bangladesh, it's 6:34 in the morning.
Oh,
it's
in the
30th.
morning.
Yes. So it's 30th March actually in Bangladesh. Same as India probably. Jeevika's.
6 o'clock in India.
Oh, we have a language barriers. The Spanish speakers are not able to understand. Is there anybody who can translate it into Spanish?
Yes, I can translate.
Okay, please.
Ya, perfecto. Lo que quieren es que cada una se coloque su nombre. Creo que se referían a eso y no sé qué más están pidiendo. I don't know what else you are asking for. I don't know. I don't know. I see everything. I think
Es correcto. Si pueden, por favor, cambiar sus perfiles con sus nombres para que todos...
Y poner sus nombres.
Y abrir la cámara para que todos nos podamos ver en esta galería. Cuando ustedes cierran, van a ver un pequeño movimiento y se mueve toda la galería. Entonces es importante que tengan sus cámaras abiertas para que todas puedan estar en el panel.
So whenever you enter or turn off your camera, the gallery view is going to be moved a little bit. So it's really important that we all keep, well, that you all panelists keep your cameras on during the session so the gallery remains stable. Thank you very much.
También es importante, abajo tienen un mundito que es la interpretación. En unos 20 minutitos se unirán más los intérpretes, que elijan el canal donde quieren hablar y escuchar y se mantengan en él. Select in the panel, you will find an icon that is like a world. That's our interpretation icon. It's very important that please select the language in which you want to speak and listen, and please stay on it. On this channel, you will hear the speakers in your language or the simultaneous interpretation.
Can I just ask a question?
También es importante que en la interpretación desactiven el audio original o mute original audio, si no escucharían los dos audios.
¿Cómo? No entendí eso yo, por favor, ¿me puedes decir? ¿Cómo? No entendí. I didn't understand the last, I mean, I have my audio the audio of my camera. Is that fine?
En la interpretación.
No, in the interpretation,
Yes.
It's important to mute the original audio, correct?
In the interpretation.
Sí.
If I speak in Spanish, if I speak in Spanish and you will translate, how can I mute my micro?
No, you only stay, only put mute original audio and you speak.
Okay. I don't know.
You are going to speak in English or in Spanish?
I'm going to speak in Spanish, I think.
In Spanish, so please choose in Spanish, the Spanish channel, and just stay there.
In the Spanish channel all the time.
Oh, okay, so that's perfect. And then you have
I
a little.
didn't want to do that. I wanted to stay in English, but you are saying that I should be in the Spanish channel.
If you're going to speak in Spanish, yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
You're welcome.
I understood.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
But can I ask a question? If Anna wants to listen in the English, when she speaks, she can then change her channel to Spanish, right? If she wants to have the option.
Yes.
All right. See, Anna?
Yes, I can come back to English.
Yes, right.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, because I would rather prefer to listen in English.
Okay, just if there's an echo, please mute the original audio to stop hearing the echo.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So will we be testing the interpretation anytime soon? Should we not do that?
We hope so, because interpreters will be 5 minutes until we start the session.
Okay. Well, they come 5 minutes before the session.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Sorry for interrupting everyone. I know you've just gone through it, but I can't find how to confirm I'm on the English channel.
Oh, right now, there are not interpreters, just only put English.
Right, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I just had a question. Arasha, when
Yes?
we speak, are we supposed to switch off the channel?
No.
The interpretation,
No.
because that's what was communicated to us in the briefing meeting, and there was some confusion.
Yes, of course. No anymore. We solved that problem. So only stay at the channel. Yes. So you can be more comfortable.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Arantxa, this is Laurence. Could we try perhaps to have everyone on camera again and do another test with the sound? I also see we have one speaker without a video, it seems, on the list. So I just wanted to double check with you.
¿Podrían mandar otra vez la galería para vernos todas y hacer el último test?
Estamos bien, se ve bien ahí, es buena la luz.
Sí.
Looks good.
Okay.
Looks very good, everyone.
We are then having one person who has joined, a speaker.
Is Norma Don Juan Pérez with us? I don't think I've seen everybody but her.
No, Exactly.
Maybe we are the sign language interpreters. We are in blue.
I see. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We also don't have Zarguna Wadud.
Yeah.
Ministra Moín, ¿podríamos volver a revisar su audio y su cámara? A ver si su conexión mejoró.
It also says one of the speakers is an attendee. If you look at the participant list, I was wondering.
Buenas tardes. Licenciada Norma, don Juan, ¿nos escucha? ¿Está por ahí?
So somebody is still speaker. Is that you, Zaguna? Oh no, that's Norma Don Juan Pérez. Okay, very good. All right. How are you? ¿Cómo estás? Yeah.
How are you, Roberta?
Hola, bien, gracias.
Bienvenida.
Gracias.
Bienvenida, ahora sí la podemos escuchar muy bien.
Qué bien. Yo también las escucho muy bien.
Ok, perfecto.
Can I just check the pronunciation of the names so I get it right? Okay, so we have my darling Ana Falu, who I know, so I know the name. And Norma Don Juan Pérez, Khodeja Sultana, is that right? Khodeja?
Perfect.
Youngsook too? I think Youngsook is not with us right now. Yes? Okay. Juany Garcia.
Correct.
Julian Guivarra.
Yes, correct.
Great. Erika Mounyes. Zarguna Wadud. Don't think Zarguna is with us yet.
No,
Okay.
I don't think she has connected yet.
Okay.
I resent the link.
And Faiza Mohammed and Jeevika Shiv.
Jeevika Shiv.
Jeevika Shiv. Okay, mine has an A at the end of it. Jeevika Shiv. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, we're on a very tight schedule. I think it's only an hour and a half. So when we ask the first question, we're asking everyone to sort of stay within the 3-minute time so that all of us get a time to talk. I think it's 4 minutes. I think we have a 4-minute time to answer the questions. 4 minutes. And then we will then do some question and answer. If we get some questions in the chat, we will respond to them. And then depend if we get questions, we will respond to them. If we don't get questions, you all may want to maybe pick up things that you all have heard amongst each other. So we'll have 10 minutes for that. To answer the questions or just interaction amongst ourselves. And then we have the last 10 minutes where each person will get 1 minute to kind of reflect on what they've heard and to speak to innovation or make a strong recommendation. So that's how we're going to be doing it. And I think, are we all on the WhatsApp group together?
I don't know.
No?
It's the
Maybe not.
technical team.
Okay, technical team. Okay. So the technical team, you all will also alert me if there are, questions that I'm not picking up on the WhatsApp, right? But I should pick them up on the
I don't know if I
system.
am in the WhatsApp, Roberta. I haven't
So
seen.
no, I'm sorry, I'm confusing things. No, the WhatsApp is only for the technical, the back end, the technical team to send me messages.
Okay.
¿Me pueden mandar a galería y ya me dejan ahí, porfa, para ya recibir el countdown? In a few more minutes, they will send the countdown. So get ready, beautiful and smiley.
Se lanzará un conteo. Previo a eso, una cortinilla con el nombre de la sesión y ya empezará con galería.
Perfecto. There will be a countdown, then a welcome slide with the name of the session, and then you are live. I want to ask again if everyone can open your cameras so we can set up the gallery, please.
So just to say that I will start talking exactly at 7 o'clock Mexico time.
Yes, as soon as the welcome slide is over, and then you will see this gallery, then you can start talking, Roberta. Yes. ¿Me confirman intérpretes si ya están, por favor?
Roberta is working.
So I see we have a new speaker. So is this Zaguna Wadud?
Where are you, Roberta?
Can you put your camera on? Ambassador, I see you changed perhaps the computer. We need to rename perhaps. Could we just do another quick sound check?
Now, can you hear me?
Yes. There's a bit of an echo. Arantxa, does it work?
Yes, it's a little bit echo. ¿Nos podría volver a saludar, ministra? Y tener encendida su cámara.
Ancha.
¿Sí?
Ya me confirmaron que a las 7 en punto empiezo sesión, abro webinar y empiezo en directo con galería con ustedes.
Ok, ¿no hay countdown?
No, entramos directo con ustedes.
Ok, we are going to There's no countdown, so in 1 minute you will be alive, okay? So get ready. ¿Me confirma intérpretes, por favor?
Listo, voy a abrir sesión.
Buenas noches, buenos días, good night, good afternoon, good morning. Greetings to you all and a very warm welcome to this session. My name is Roberta Clarke. I am presently in Trinidad and Tobago and I'm from the Caribbean and currently the officer in charge of the UN Women East and Southern Africa Regional Office. I am so honored to be the moderator of this panel, which is appropriately addressing the issue of the crisis of gender-based violence in the context of COVID-19. I am joined by a panel of 10 women from across the globe who from different locations of influence are committed to make the world a safer place for women and girls. Our goal here tonight is to generate and or reinforce global and innovative recommendations for the prevention and the effective response to end to gender-based violence against women and girls. As you know, it has been 26 years since the 4th World Conference on Women in Beijing, at which governments and civil society and the intergovernmental system made commitments to end all forms of violence against women. That's 26 years ago. Yet in every country, violence against women is at a crisis stage. And the current crisis, the pandemic, has exacerbated this vulnerability. But we know that all crises exacerbate the vulnerability, as we have seen in conflict-affected places, as we have seen in the aftermath of natural disasters, as we have seen in times of economic turbulence, and really, as we have seen at any time when gender inequality defines and constrains the lives of women and girls. So COVID-19 has exposed and intensified the inequalities, and we know that. We gather here tonight and today and this morning, wherever you are located in the world, to strengthen our resolve to act. This Generation Equality Forum and the movement around it is about making commitments, not just talking, making commitments and acting on those commitments. All of us, everywhere, inhabit spaces where we can use our voice, where we can support others in using their voice for the kind of cultural and institutional changes needed for effective responses that will keep women and girls safe and for prevention of harm that comes with structural inequality between the genders. Now more than ever, we need to make strong, comprehensive, and indeed intersectional commitments for a safer world. In our session here over the next hour and a half, we have 3 components. In the first component, we will look at our situation today since the Beijing Platform for Action and ask ourselves, what has changed? 26 years has passed. What has changed? What has changed for the good? What has not? What has also regressed? And secondly, we will discuss some key priorities for action. And finally, we will have a question and answer period where we hope that those of you who are listening, wherever you are in the world, will engage with us by using the question and answer facility in Zoom. Please don't hesitate, put all your questions there. We will be looking at them as the session goes along. And finally, in the third portion of the session, we will ask each panelist to give a 1-minute reflection of what they've heard, but in particular to give us kind of one key action that they are recommending that we all take. So it is my distinct honor to introduce these 10 panelists for the session. And I'm going to start with Ana Falu, who is a professor emeritus at the University of Cordoba in Argentina. Good, I think it's night where you are, Ana. Norma Don Juan Pérez, Coordinadora Nacional de Mujeres Indígenas, based in Mexico. Khodeja Sultana, who is the country director of Diakonia, Bangladesh. We have with us Juany Garcia of the Youth Task Force, Levantemos, Guatemala. Julianne Guivarra, Ambassador for Gender Equality all the way in Australia. We have with us Erika Mounyes, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, the Republic of Panama. Zarghuna Wadud, Provincial Coordinator, the National Forum on Women with Disabilities in Pakistan. Faiza Jama Mohammed, the Director of Equality Now, the Africa Office. And finally, Jeevika Shiv of the Gender Equality Forum Youth Task Force, India. Everyone has their cameras on, and we can all say hello to everyone as we start the session. So, as you know, it was surprising, I think many of us, yes. When we reflect on how much we know about violence against women, I suppose it's surprising that the Women's Convention back in 1981 did not at all really speak to all forms of gender-based violence. This was remedied in the Beijing Platform for Action, drawing on the intense global organizing around this issue. And since 1995, I think we can agree that much of the activism related to women's rights seems to have focused on ending all forms of violence against women. So my question for you, the first question for you, Professor Falu, how has the gender-based violence context changed since 1995, since the Beijing Platform for Action? Where are we in comparison to 1995 today? Anna, you have to unmute.
Unmute, yes, yes. Thank you very much, my dear Roberta Clarke. It is an enormous pleasure.
Anna, I don't think we're hearing you.
Invited to participate in this panel, moderated by you.
Laurent, can you help us?
My mother tongue. ¿Cómo ha cambiado el contexto de las violencias? Yo creo que hay que decir que Beijing significó un momento, sorry, there is noise. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Colleagues, are you all hearing Anna?
Beijing fue un momento increíble del feminismo que se construyó en un proceso en clave de movimiento. Este fue un proceso que tuvo un punto inicial anterior, en 1975, pero que tuvo como antecedente extraordinario en los temas de violencia la Convención de Belén du Pará, que fue la convención pionera de América Latina que tomó los temas de violencia y comprometió a los estados. Pero hoy tenemos que revisar la plataforma de acción mundial. Hoy tenemos que revisarla y hay que articularla con otros instrumentos y actualizarla, porque ha habido cambios muy profundos en el mundo, desde entonces a hoy. En el mundo hemos tenido el 11S, que significó un momento de cambio total en el inicio de este siglo, sobre una serie de cuestiones políticas, culturales, religiosas, que han ampliado, y además en un mundo que ha ampliado las brechas de desigualdad que han dejado a las mujeres en mayores vulnerabilidades. En estos 25, 30 años, es realmente impresionante lo que hemos hecho las mujeres, porque hemos logrado hacer visible lo que estaba oculto por milenios. Pasamos a tener leyes de última generación, avanzamos en leyes integrales de violencia contra las mujeres. Por eso yo soy optimista. Soy optimista, pero no soy ingenua. Estoy muy lejos de ser ingenua. Creo que tenemos que estar muy atentas y observar las fuerzas conservadoras, las fuerzas fundamentalistas que abren amenazadoramente las puertas para el retroceso de los derechos ganados. Pero soy optimista porque creo que en este momento, con las jóvenes mujeres en las calles del mundo, tenemos la mejor garantía para cuidar lo que hemos avanzado. Constituyen una nueva y potente fuerza feminista, plural, múltiple y diversa, que dice vivas nos queremos. Una fuerza colectiva que se expresa cuando dice si tocan a una, tocan a todas, instalando un nuevo sujeto social y político. Y también porque este reclamo contra las violencias no va a ser solo contra las violencias sobre los cuerpos en el sentido que veníamos trabajándolo. Ahora se va a vincular al tema del trabajo, del igual salario, del cuidado como tarea que realizábamos las mujeres. Entonces hay un plural amplio, complejo, que se asume y se coloca en lo público y se reclama desde la decisión de los cuerpos. Tenemos nuevas nociones conceptuales. Hemos complejizado el análisis de la violencia. Hemos trabajado desde entramados e intersecciones sobre las cuales buscamos dar cuenta del racismo, de las pobrezas estructurales, del patriarcado y el poscolonialismo y el colonialismo renovado. Las dueñidades, dice la querida Rita Segato, que debería estar en este panel. Las masculinidades tóxicas. Desde SIGSA, ya en el 2005, con el programa de Ciudades sin Violencia para las Mujeres, en donde estábamos colocando de manera innovativa el tema de los territorios y las violencias, los espacios públicos y las violencias, dijeron Liliana Rainero, Maite Rodigú, Soledad Pérez, las políticas están dirigidas a erradicar, sancionar la violencia desde una concepción asistencialista, victimista, delegativa de la problemática. Sabemos que tenemos que ir más allá. El territorio cuerpo, los territorios barrio, los territorios ciudades, reforzando el concepto de las autonomías, las decisiones sobre los cuerpos, pero también sobre otros territorios, planteando que es importante colocar lo colectivo sobre lo individual, cuestionando la mercantilización desde un análisis situado. Cambió la concepción de género. La concepción de género se amplió a la vida de otros sujetos subalternizados, la población LGTBIQ y más, la población no binaria. Entonces, planteamos esto. También hablamos de la violencia política sexualizada que ocupa las agencias de la violencia, que se suma al techo de cristal y al piso barroso que limita las trayectorias políticas de las mujeres. Las violencias cibernéticas, que tienen un amplio alcance y modalidades. Instalamos nuevos temas de reflexión. Ya cierro, Roberta.
Thank you, Ana.
Instalamos nuevos temas de reflexión sobre el punitivismo, sobre el acoso sexual y la victimización de las mujeres. Se instalaron en el mundo expresiones artísticas como el violador eras tú, el violador eres tú, las mujeres empoderadas denunciando. Cierro diciendo, como dice Rita Segato, las mujeres estamos proponiendo un cambio de época en la desconfiguración, en la desestabilización del patrón político del patriarcado. Es hora de enojarnos, mujeres. Nos siguen matando, nos siguen abusando, nos siguen acosando. Hay mucho para hacer. Mucho ha cambiado, mucho hemos avanzado y hay mucho para hacer. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Anna. It is time to be mad. I agree with that. It's time to be outraged. I want to ask the country director of Diakonia, Khodeja. You've heard Anna speak about the breaking of the silence, you know, the progress that has been made in laws all over the world, but that, in fact, there are new forces which we have to take into consideration that are threatening even the gains that we have made. From your experience in Bangladesh, how do you answer that question? How has the gender-based violence context changed since 1995?
First of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting me. I am Khodeja Sultana, working for Diakonia. Diakonia is working in Bangladesh for more than 50 years. From that experience, I would like to respond to your question. Since 1995 in Bangladesh, we have attained a lot of progress. The context has been improved a lot. We have a steady economic growth and more girls and boys are completing school education. In fact, we have achieved gender equality, gender parity in primary and secondary school enrollment. At the same time, maternal mortality rate that has reduced approximately 69%. Acid throwing also reduced considerably. Within these 25 years, we have also several policy level advancements. For example, National Women Development Policy was first adopted in 1997. Domestic Violence Prevention and Protection Act has been passed in 2010. Gender responsive budgeting, budget reporting, this has been initiated in 2009 in 4 ministries. Now it is expanded to 43 ministries. And our Honorable Prime Minister, she continues to be a role model for women in leadership position. Overall, we have a state commitment and framework to some extent for gender equality, but some of the major challenges remain strong. Within the last 25 years, brutally, the number of rapes and number of murders of women by husbands were the highest in year 2020 during the COVID pandemic. According to Aino Shalish Kendra Human Rights Organization report, on an average every day, around 5 women were raped and 2 women were killed by their husbands. This is during COVID pandemic period. They were not killed by virus, they were killed by men. Along with rape and murder, there are also child marriage and dowry, for instance. There are online violence, including threats, sharing of private images or videos without consent. These are new forms of violence against women and girls. The violence and fear of violence against women and girls are widespread, and there is low implementation of law. And sometimes law is Bangladesh, marital rape is yet to be considered as a punishable offense. If these were considered, the number of rapes would be much higher. Now, can you imagine right now how many are enduring pain, getting killed, getting raped because of their sex, because of being women or girls? Here, the root causes of suffering is patriarchy. It is embedded in our society and continues to discriminate women and being manifested in laws, customs, culture, etc. We have religion-based family laws on marriage, divorce, and inheritance. And these laws discriminate against women and girls. Women's participation in politics and in workforce have increased, but the rates are still very low compared to men. Regarding COVID, similar to other disasters, this pandemic is also not gender blind. Women have to take on more because of their socio-economic conditions assigned by patriarchal structure, and many are trapped with their violent partners. And we have data-related challenge. Unfortunately, we do not have regular system of tracking and recording of gender-based violence. And the first national survey on violence against women was conducted in 2011. And the second and the last one was done 5 years ago. But if we look at COVID data, every day, every death, every recovery is counted. If we have the capacity to do that for COVID, why cannot we do the same capacity, use the same capacity to record and analyze violence against women? This is a priority issue to address for years after years. Now, if we look at language used in policy, in books, in media, gender insensitive language and stereotyping are prevalent. They reinforce gender stereotyping. Even if you look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, on several instances, it failed to use gender-neutral language. For example, the first article has the term spirit of brotherhood. And unfortunately, civil society organizations are facing fund crisis to continue activities for gender equality. Overall, during the last 25 years, there are successes. At the same time, many long-standing issues, together with backwardness, continue to be a major challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Khodeja. And we really note that you're saying there in Bangladesh the dramatic increase in all forms of violence, but rapes and murders by husbands in the domestic setting, and that it's been the highest as it has been for a long
2020.
time. Yeah, 2020. I mean, yeah, I mean, it is painful. And I come back to Anna's point that this is the time to be mad. It's the time for outrage and for action. I want to turn my next question to, it's the same question really, to Norma, Don Juan Pérez. We know that that violence against women cannot be eradicated without careful consideration of the intersections between gender and other forms of social inequalities, such as race or sexuality, sexual orientation, ethnicity, abilities, indigeneity, and so on. And this intersectional analysis was embedded in the Beijing Platform for Action. And though I agree with Anna that it needs to be updated, it really reads so fresh. You think you have to reflect on the wisdom of the women and the men who wrote that document 26 years ago. But based on your experience as the National Coordinator for Indigenous Women in Mexico, Norma, can you reflect on how the gender-based violence context has changed in your country and for Indigenous women since 1995?
Noixniwan Tlapailoli, la saludo con respeto y alegría, compañeras, hermanas. Agradezco la oportunidad de compartir la palabra, que no es mía, sino de mis hermanas, mujeres indígenas de Norteamérica, Latinoamérica y el Caribe, Asia, África, Ártico y Pacífico. Construimos colectivamente el posicionamiento global de mujeres indígenas para el Foro Generación Igualdad y más allá, y también retomo algunos planteamientos de la Declaración de Juventudes, porque me parece que es importante también retomar la palabra en la diversidad de mujeres que somos. Creo que en eso hemos avanzado de Beijing ahora, en fortalecer nuestra participación organizada y articulada desde lo local hasta lo global. Tenemos más presencia en espacios como estos y más posibilidades de que se escuchen nuestras voces. Pero aún estamos lejos de incidir en la transformación de los sistemas de opresión que nos siguen colocando en el papel de sujetas de atención y se resisten a mirarnos como sujetas de derechos. En 1995 adoptamos y firmamos la Declaración de Mujeres Indígenas de Beijing. Establece la base de nuestras reivindicaciones como mujeres indígenas del mundo. Desde entonces y hasta hoy, reafirmamos nuestras contribuciones al desarrollo sostenible, a la conservación de la biodiversidad y la madre tierra o Pachamama, que también llaman recursos naturales. Valoramos lo alcanzado en reconocimientos legales y políticos, tanto a nivel internacional como nacional, aunque hay que reconocer que todavía hay países que se niegan a reconocer a la población indígena y, por lo tanto, a las mujeres indígenas. Hay avances en relación a nuestros derechos individuales y colectivos, avances para poner en marcha nuestras agendas comunes que nos permitan avanzar hacia la igualdad de género y el buen vivir. Estos avances se ven opacados por la presencia de prácticas discriminatorias, racistas, adultocéntricas, sin perspectiva intercultural, interseccional y de género. Seguimos enfrentando desafíos que limitan el ejercicio pleno y efectivo de nuestros derechos. En particular, seguimos enfrentando múltiples expresiones de violencia y la apropiación cada vez más agresiva de nuestros territorios, de nuestras prácticas y saberes por los estados y las empresas transnacionales que todo han mercantilizado, incluyendo nuestros cuerpos. Seguimos enfrentando, como hace 25 años lo dijimos, la contaminación de los suelos, las fuentes hídricas con químicos que afectan la salud y la biodiversidad, el impacto de la colonización, globalización, militarización de los territorios, el desplazamiento y la migración forzada, la criminalización y represión de la protesta social, incluyendo los ataques de género, así como la explotación y trata de mujeres indígenas en zonas fronterizas. La pandemia del COVID ha agravado las desigualdades y la vulneración de los derechos de las mujeres en general y especialmente de la niñez, adolescencia y juventudes, que enfrentan violencia que se vive en incluso espacios digitales. La violencia sexual se ha agravado. En México hablamos de feminicidios y ahora hablamos de asesinatos de niñas que incluso ni siquiera tienen 5 años de edad. Entonces, eso se ha agravado desafortunadamente. Antes veíamos esto en las grandes ciudades y esto ya es algo que sucede también en los espacios más pequeños, en las comunidades. Ha aumentado nuestra participación en espacios políticos, pero en esa misma proporción ha aumentado la violencia política. Y el sistema reconoce el delito, pero no hay responsable del delito. La impunidad sigue siendo algo que agrava esta violencia. También enfrentamos violencia institucional. Ahora hay presupuestos, hay instituciones, pero también esas instituciones nos siguen violentando. Esto, pues, nos habla de un marco muy complejo en el que hay avances, pero también se han acentuado mucho las violencias. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Norma. I think you've taken us through the complexity that even whilst we are seeing improvements in laws, in legal frameworks and institutional frameworks, somehow the violence against women is becoming more violent and more endemic. So I guess the question that I want to ask Ambassador Youngsook from Korea, in your country, you have had significant improvements in your legal framework and in your institutional framework. Have those improvements changed the culture towards zero tolerance, or is it changing the culture in a way that we can appreciate its progress? What's your perspective on what has changed since 1995?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak in a valuable discussion today. As an ambassador for gender equality, I'd like to share the legal changes and challenges of Korean society through GBV for 25 years. First, the legal change in GBV was significant, as you mentioned. After the Beijing Platform for Action, Korea's policies against GBV have made legal and institutional advancement through strong demand from civil society led by women's organizations. In 1994, 1 year before Beijing Conference, the Sexual Violence Prevention Act was enacted, and in 1997, the Domestic Violence Prevention Act was enacted. Following these legal changes, Korean government and women's organizations have made efforts to promote the public awareness that sexual violence and domestic violence are not a private but a social issues. In 1999, the Equal Employment Act set out a new provision on the prohibition and prevention of sexual violence in the workplace. In 2004, the Punishment of Prostitution Procurement and Victim Protection and Prevention Act was enacted, which provided a legal framework to support for victims and survivors of commercial sexual exploitation. In 2013, the provision requiring a complaint from the victim for prosecution was abolished for all types of sexual offenses, contributing to alleviating the victim's distress from the offender's demands for settlement or withdrawal of charges. With the global spread of the Me Too movement in 2018, the government has put in place public-private partnership-based pan-government body for eradicating sexual harassment and sexual violence. And the Prevention of Violence Against Women Framework Act was established in 2019, clearly stating the state responsibility for preventing violence against women and providing support for victims. Second, stronger and faster measures are urgently needed to eradicate new types of gender-based violence. Digital sex crimes, such as online grooming and illegal video production and distributing using ICT technologies, are increasing. To respond to this, the government established comprehensive measures against digital sex crimes in 2017 and strengthening punishment since 2020. In addition, the Digital Sex Crime Victim Support Center had been in operation since 2018, providing customized services with victims, including counseling, content deletion, and monitoring. Although laws and systems have been continuously improved, new types of GBV, such as misogyny, femicide, revenge porno, dating violence, and stalking, are constantly occurring in blind spots of the law. Therefore, it is most urgent to strengthen financial and other support to ensure the activities of women's organizations fighting against new types of gender-based violence before the government. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Juany, you're here with us from the Youth Task Force of Levantemos, Guatemala. And you've heard, I think, the 4 speakers before you speak to the changes that have happened since 1995. And many of those changes have to do with legal changes or institutional changes. I'm wondering, from your perspective, in 2021, and as a member of the Youth Task Force, do you think that those changes have been as transformative as they could have been? And how are you experiencing the world of action around ending violence against women? What is your sense of the progress being made?
Muchas gracias por la invitación. Un saludo cordial y afectuoso a todos, todas y todos que nos están visualizando de esta plataforma y de este foro. Es un honor realmente compartir este espacio con mujeres que están liderando procesos alrededor del mundo. Nuestra reflexión en torno al contexto y cómo se han dado estos cambios desde 1995 durante la 4ª Conferencia Mundial sobre la Mujer, aplaudimos el hecho principal de que identificaron como un obstáculo para lograr la igualdad de género en el mundo el tema de la violencia. A partir de 1995 se identificaron objetivos concretos para accionar al respecto y enfatizar a favor de niñas, jóvenes y mujeres. Y fue esa apertura a una brecha de oportunidades. Sin embargo, y a pesar de los esfuerzos, consideramos que hoy en día la violencia sigue siendo una amenaza muy significativa en contra del bienestar físico, emocional, sexual y económico que viven muchas niñas, adolescentes y jóvenes en el mundo. La violencia basada en género sigue siendo una de nuestras principales preocupaciones, dado que a pesar de que existen leyes y políticas públicas, no se ha logrado dar solución a las problemáticas de nuestros países. Aún existen países que no han ratificado las convenciones y tratados internacionales, lo que viene a limitar la implementación de políticas, de planes, de acción a favor de las niñas y jóvenes en el mundo. Identificamos también que existe insuficiencia en la asignación de recursos para la prevención, la detección y atención de las violencias y la no garantía de acceso a la justicia, que se refleja en los estados que no lo consideran como un tema prioritario. Muchos de los avances para combatir la violencia basada en género son iniciativas que surgen de parte de la población directa, de niñas, de jóvenes, de mujeres que están implementando programas alrededor del mundo que vienen a fortalecer las acciones de las mujeres, de las niñas y a combatir los temas urgentes como lo son la violencia. Los femicidios, la violencia sexual, digital y política son una constante en nuestra región y, por qué no decirlo, también en el mundo. Y han ido en aumento en los últimos días. En un contexto de desigualdad económica, social, cultural y racial que afecta a las mujeres indígenas, afrodescendientes, con discapacidad, LGTBQ+, con VIH, migrantes, niñas, adolescentes y jóvenes que enfrentan mayor dificultad en el ejercicio pleno de sus derechos y el acceso a oportunidades en condiciones de desigualdad. Lo que se pone en manifiesto en el actual contexto del COVID-19, donde los informes de violencia de género hacia niñas y jóvenes han ido en aumento en toda su diversidad y han aumentado muy considerablemente en nuestros países. El hecho de quedarse en casa, que ha contribuido a poder frenar la propagación del virus. Sin embargo, las condiciones de vida confinadas y las tensiones están exacerbando las experiencias de violencia de género, que ya constituían un grave problema social y de salud pública de género antes de la pandemia y que ahora se ven agravados por el acceso limitado al servicio de apoyo y refugios seguros durante esta crisis. Sin embargo, consideramos que es muy importante este momento para poder unificar nuestros esfuerzos y accionar en este tema, para que en el 2026, junto a las coaliciones de acción, logremos generar una igualdad con cambios significativos, tomando como referencia los marcos legales que vienen a fortalecer nuestras acciones a nivel local, regional y de nuestros países. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Juany. I think you remind us that, you know, notwithstanding the progress, that we have insufficient resources to do the work that's needed to be done. We have insufficient implementation. I think the speaker before you, was it Norma, who spoke about impunity and the lack of accountability. I want to turn my attention to Ambassador Guivarra. You know, we've heard quite a bit of the barriers, and the fundamental sort of barrier has to be, I guess, as Anna has spoken about, patriarchy, and patriarchy combined with other forms of oppressions. But I think we are all optimists, even though we're not naive, as Anna's reminded us, but we have to be optimistic, continue doing this work that is so needed. I want to maybe ask you, Ambassador, in the context of what you all have been doing in Australia, what urgent actions do you think we need to promote between governments and movements and the society to transform, to make the transformation that we need at the level of culture and at the level of institutions? How would you sort of guide us?
Thanks, Roberta, for the introduction. And I do want to start by thanking, obviously, the government of Mexico and UN Women for organising this event, and also thanking my fellow speakers for this panel today. It's already been particularly interesting to observe that some of the challenges, of course, that we're hearing from various other parts of the globe also affect us here in the Indo-Pacific region, where I'm speaking to you from today. As many speakers have said before me, obviously COVID-19 has exacerbated inequalities, including gender inequalities. And I think one of the key manifestations of this that we have witnessed, of course, is increases in gender-based violence. I think it was around April last year that the UNFPA predicted that there would potentially be around 31 million additional cases of gender-based violence as a result of pandemic triggers. And it said for every 3 months of that lockdowns continued after an initial 6 months, that there could be an additional 15 million cases of gender-based violence globally. I mean, that wasn't the only sort of rapid assessments that were done around that stage. Of course, there were several reports done, including by UN Women, on potential impacts in the Asia Pacific region from where I'm speaking today. That really caused us to think about, what did we need to prioritize as a matter of urgency to address these challenges right now. Obviously, the immediate priorities were to ensure that we continue to have essential services provided. We've done that domestically here in Australia. There was a provision of an additional $150 million program domestically to specifically respond to domestic violence during COVID-19. That funding went to programs such as supporting our domestic violence hotline in Australia as one of the examples. We've also responded through our development program. So we have a development program response to COVID-19, which has been called Partnerships for Recovery. And through that, we've had a particular eye to ensuring that the continuation of essential services for gender-based violence had a particular focus. To give you some practical examples of things that we have tried to do, we have a program in Cambodia called Access, and that program, which has been providing gender-based violence support for some time, we ensured, of course, that there was the provision of PPE during this COVID period to ensure that they could continue to function. We have another program called Nabilan, which actually works out of Timor-Leste. And there too, we've been working with the government of Timor-Leste to ensure that women's shelters remain open during this time, remain open and also COVID-free. We have also observed, obviously, during this COVID period, just how essential it is and really important to rely on civil society organisations as frontline responders to COVID-19. We have had to rely on them as our critical partners in the region in terms of that continuation, as I said, of providing essential services to survivors of gender-based violence. I mean, these are really the urgent actions that we have seen that have needed to be done during this period. But it's also true that while we have seen an escalation in gender-based violence during this pandemic, it is also true to say that this is an ongoing issue. I mean, prior to the pandemic, it was reported, of course, that there were over 243 million women and girls who've been subjected to physical or sexual violence by intimate partners over the past 12 months. There is clearly much more that needs to be done in the prevention space. Here in Australia, we have had, of course, a national plan to reduce violence against women and their children, but going back to 2010, so that plan actually goes from 2010 to 2022. I mean, obviously the government recognises that addressing violence requires really a long-term comprehensive strategy, which is what this plan endeavours to do. What we've seen over the 11 years of this particular plan is a growing importance, obviously, on prevention work. Because underpinning, of course, gender-based violence is the pre-existing gender inequalities. So changing social and cultural norms is really critically important. We need, obviously, boys and girls and men and women to understand how their behaviours either support or detract from achieving true gender equality. In Australia, the government has had programs and media campaigns such as the Stop It at the Start campaign, which is really designed to raise awareness of gender inequalities, to change gender stereotypes and to encourage more respectful relationships between boys and girls and men and women. We also have civil society organisations that we work with on these sorts of campaigns. Here in Australia, there is a civil society organisation which is called Our Watch, which is a national leader actually on primary prevention research and work. A few years back, they did a prevention campaign called Change the Story, which is focused on changing those issues around social norms. Through Australia's development program, we've been addressing gender-based violence with a particular focus on our responses I mentioned to COVID-19. The government's response, Partnerships for Recovery, has really looked at how we might provide additional support in various areas. So we have, of course, provided additional funding support to the UN Trust Fund to end violence against women. And we have also supported the UN Joint Programme on the provision of essential services. We are continuing our work with existing partners through programs such as the Pacific Partnership to End Violence Against Women and Girls. And that partnership too has been really essential in ensuring during this crisis that crisis centres remain open in countries such as Fiji and Tonga and Vanuatu, the Solomon Islands, Kiribati and Samoa. So we are working very actively with countries around our region, some 17 in total. So if I were to summarize, how we look at, the key issue of prioritization on addressing gender-based violence at this time, it is a couple of things. One, obviously during COVID-19, recognizing and addressing that there has been a rise in gender-based violence. Number two, ensuring that we can continue to provide essential services during this period. Number three, keeping a focus on the essential prevention piece, because addressing gender-based violence ultimately comes down to focusing on a change in gender inequalities which exist in our societies. And fourthly, but not last, supporting our civil society partners, because they are truly critical part of our frontline responders to the priorities that we have seen during this time of COVID-19 and addressing gender-based violence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I have a little IT problem here. Can you all indicate if you're hearing me? Yes, okay, great. Thank you very much. Ambassador, I think you make some really essential points. So we know that there's been a rise in GBV, and one of the things that Ambassador Youngsook reminded us of was also the rise in cyber violence against women. And I have some statistics here that during the COVID lockdown, there's been a 73% increase in online violence perpetrated against women and girls. So apart from the violence that we have been tracking over these years, we're also seeing something that is perhaps even harder to try to get at. And so essential services, we know that those have to be scaled up, and that women need access to justice, access to shelter and accommodation in crisis. They need health services, social services, psychosocial protections, and so on. But we also know that even where countries have national action plans in place, these action plans may not have been well-resourced and under-implemented. And the question is, what is the source of this lack of political will? Some years ago, I heard a wonderful definition of political will being having the intention and the capacity to achieve a result. So my question is, what are the factors that undermine the political will? And I think we do have to come back to the question of the patriarchy and gender inequality, along with other inequalities that undermine the response. And so I want to ask in this regard, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Republic of Panama, Minister Mounyes, in the context of Panama, what do you see as the urgent actions? What are the game changers? Where should we be going to strengthen our response, but also to actually deepen our commitment to the prevention work that is so needed? Minister Mounyes?
Yes, thank you. And I think it's very relevant to think about in the context of the pandemic, what do we think that is the solution? And I say that because if we look at history, pandemics or crises in general have been the ones who define the world for decades to come. So rather than focusing on what is done to all of us, and I think that we all recognize how difficult it's been, particularly for women, for gender equality, for violence, try to focus this crisis as an opportunity to finally put women at the center of the agenda and women-related issues, including violence, at that center of the agenda. We have, at the end, all governments throughout the world are dealing with the same issue. We have a terrible pandemic that has undermined the ability for normally what would be the private sector, for enterprises to maneuver. And they're all economies are dependent right now on state-led initiatives. We have subsidies, we have tax credits. I mean, there are a slew of ideas that different states are putting out. And some of them we've heard today that are starting to focus on women. Yes. So we propose that we focus on women particularly, and we take the time and we take this crisis to focus in small steps. It will be difficult, if not impossible, to achieve, and we know that it will take years, and the pandemic itself has taken a lot of work that we had already accomplished. So unless we take drastic measures and we make sure that through a number of ideas, one including economic empowerment, and that every single tax subsidy, every single aid that is being provided by the different governments, there's specific gender-focused agenda among all of them. So we're able to finally use this crisis to jumpstart what needed to be done decades ago. And the second, and I think that's as leaders, we have a significant responsibility to speak out and to say the truth whenever we can. There's a reason why we don't have more women leading and at head of states, and that's not for lack of capacity, it's for lack of opportunity. So whenever we have the ability to be in front, to call out the truth of what's happening in each of our countries, I'll give us an example. During the pandemic at the beginning, we had some newspapers put out statements saying that we were doing great because there was no domestic violence in Panama. And that is absolutely not the case. That's just an example of not being able to see what is the reality, why women are not seeking out help and are not calling out. We had a significant lockdown, and women relying on their partner were able or were enduring abuse and not speaking out. And if we don't say something or we don't do something about it, we're then becoming complicit. So I think part of the agenda for any women leader has to be make sure that you carry this agenda in front of men. I don't know, in the last cabinet we had, for example, I actually went company by company, every single board that did not include a woman, naming them one by one, as long as it took me, to make sure that they were actually acknowledging at least that it's a terrible reality, and it's not, again, for lack of capacity, but for lack of opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Mounyes, for your contributions. I want to just welcome our colleague from Pakistan, Ms. Zarguna Wadood, who's Provincial Coordinator of the National Forum on Women with Disabilities in Pakistan. Welcome, Zarguna. Can you have a reflection on what you've heard already tonight? What are the priorities for you, and in particular, women living with disabilities? And what urgent actions would you recommend that we need to take to promote the prevention of such violence? Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for taking me on board. I would just give a brief introduction of myself. I am the province coordinator of National Forum of Women with Disabilities. And we have been working on disability since years. And well, I would like to recommend from the perspective of disability that when we talk about overcoming the gender-based violence at all levels, in the government, in the society, through the movements, I would say that the most important thing is this regard is our inclusion. When we will be taking on board at every level, like when we talk about the government, when we'll be in the policy making, we can very easily address the problems that we are facing. And beside that, we can also recommend the solutions to it. And same is the case with the movements. When we are a part of every movement that has some concern with women's rights, that have some fight for the women's rights, we should be there also. And beside that, the society also, I mean to say that around every discrimination, around every violence that we women with disabilities are facing, it not only physical, it may be mental, it may be social, and it has a lot of categories. And to end up that, we need to be included in society so that we can be heard, first of all. And after that, when we are heard, we have to be self-aware of our rights also, that where and when and how to talk where we are facing some kind of discrimination or violence. And for that, you have to be empowered enough to know your rights. And in our case, the most important thing is that our family needs to be cooperative with us, so that we also can be a very part of this society. So this is what I suggest, that we need to be included first of all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aguna. Inclusion, empowerment, awareness of rights, all of those things, I think will echo with everyone on the call. I want to turn my attention now to Faiza, who is the Director of Equality now in the Africa office, and asking you from the point of view of the civil society perspective. We've heard a lot about what states have been doing, in particular in relation to the law reform, but also the provision of essential services. And of course, NGOs provide a lot of essential services. In fact, essential services started off through the women's movement, opening shelters and hotlines. But from the point of view of the civil society perspective, what do you think are the priorities now? What does the CSO movement and women's movement bring to this agenda? And how do we strengthen our advocacy?
Okay. Well, thank you. Glad to be with you all. Greetings from Nairobi. The majority of countries, I would say, have made commitments through policies and legislation. But what's wanting really is the lack of action in different spheres of rights that are being committed during the platform for action in Beijing. So three things that countries can do basically is, first, for example, if you take female genital mutilation, to be intolerant, countries take a long time to say that they will sensitize communities and keep going for years to do that. At some point, you have to move on, having brought a good number, of the community awareness raising and all that. So elimination should be taken more seriously. Back it with state funding, and back it with state actors, working together closely. So basically what I'm saying is a multi-sectoral approach is critical in terms of making real impact. We are seeing different state actors, for example, leave everything to the women's machinery, which is not supposed to, least resources in the state, in government, and therefore needs to bring all other actors also who have also mandate. So if you take female genital mutilation, medicalization is happening. So Ministry of Health largely plays a big role in that. Girls are taken out of school, so Education Ministry comes in also. Minister of Information similarly has to educate the public at large. But critical also is to invest in the youth, because the youth to invest in their action and encourage them to prioritize also the harmful practices and other types of violence that are meted against girls. And this should be survivor-centered, amplifying the voices of those young girls, and also encouraging a lot of intergenerational dialogue at community level. I think those are critical points, I would say. But of course, in different aspects, whether it's violence against women, whether it's property issues, marriage, even at the personal law, all those are progress has been made, but we are far from reaching really where we can happily say that we are reaching equality.
Thank you very much, Faiza. I think that we can agree that you do need the confluence of all actors to engage in this area of work, and I think it's well acknowledged that the most prevalent form of violence and crime globally is violence against women and girls, and a lot of that is happening in the home, but also, as we've seen from COVID, that there's also been an increase in sexual violence as police are distracted, as services are disrupted. There are whole areas of insecurity that have grown. So we also need to be looking not only at state action, but then what are the changes that we need in culture? And you spoke about being intolerant of harmful practices. That there is something that's we have to trigger that sense of community obligation to change culture and to hold each other accountable, and also to hold the state accountable for effective provision of services and for prevention approaches, including through the school system. And as I speak about the school system, I want to turn my attention to Jeevika Shiv of the Gender Equality Forum Youth Task Force based in India. And from your perspective, you are a civil society advocate, you're a youth advocate. What do you think are the priorities from the perspective of youth now? What would you say we should all be doing?
Thank you, Roberta, for asking a really, really relevant question at an intergenerational space. And I'm really happy and honored to be here speaking amongst all of you. I want to begin by just acknowledging I come from India, where the feminist movement has led the struggles on gender-based violence. And we've seen so many changes that have happened even in the last 10 years, just through the struggles of the feminist movement. And I emphasize on movements, and I want to acknowledge all of them. And of course, we see that at the national level and international level. And youth have been an integral part of this struggle, both in my country and globally, But youth also ask critical questions, So the first question I would like to foreground here is, how do we look at intersectionality? As one of the founders of our Constitution of India, Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar used to say, and I think it's very, very relevant, there is no annihilation of patriarchy without the annihilation of racism, casteism, and differences which are structural. So how are we designing policy for transformational change and bringing on all these factors? We've seen large-scale violence against young girls, against women, based on their identities in my region and across the world. I identify with people in Mexico when they've been speaking about it. Young activists have been telling us about it, while the governments in our countries have done so much. There are very robust mechanisms, there are laws, there are policies. How do we reach the last mile? Whether it's disabled, whether it's indigenous people. So I think foregrounding this, there are some approaches that as youth today, we'd like to push forward in the forum and across for the next decade to come, which is, how are we listening to survivors? Are we listening to those who've been through it to build our systems? Or are we just going to continue to, plug it as an administrative gap? And I think, that's something we ask our governments, we ask our systems. And to do that, we need to really listen to the grassroots and invest in the grassroots, so that, and especially in the young grassroots, the young local, to make it global and build a global change for gender equality and eradication of gender-based violence. But we can't again do this without moving beyond the gender binary. And many countries, especially youth, have been targeted for not conforming to gender norms and not conforming to gender identity. So I want to foreground their voices here today to say how we're creating a safe space. Are our actions going to commit to that safe space? And I would encourage all of us to call to account our governments, call to account our systems, to our commitment makers, to be able to look at this data more. You know, as some of our esteemed panelists said, we use data, and I think those who don't need to be able to foreground gender-based data on violence instead of just calling out, because, you know, without data, we just call out. And while the Me Too movement in my country and across has called out and changed, you know, brought transformational change, it's also time to hold to account through data, through mechanisms, through networks, funding those networks, resourcing those networks, and bringing in the last mile voice. While I say this, I also acknowledge that our country has very low rates of conviction and high crime rates. We've also struggled with how to respond during the pandemic. There have been responses by our National Commission for Women, by robust civil society in my country and across the globe on how to respond to this violence. But again, the other side of this is we should not ask for immediate punitive action or criminalization. Who are we criminalizing and who are we not needs to be thought of very carefully. And as an advocate and a social worker, I think that's extremely important. How do we build the mechanism so that we are not reactive, not asking for death penalty, but asking for transformational justice? I think that's a very, very important thing. And to be able to do all this, we need to work together as much, you know, in multi-stakeholder partnerships, being able to foreground both the state and autonomous organizations and collectives, and being able to bring their voice to the forefront of this, to build through mechanisms which are robust to be able to deal with all of this. You know, in doing all of this, where are the men? Are we dialoguing enough? Are we holding them to account? Are we even asking the questions, you know, as esteemed ma'am raised about toxic masculinity and making those spaces, and also at the same time holding our systems to account to ask those questions and not only leave it to individuals. So of course that brings me to, you know, create the spaces for dialogue. And coming from a feminist collective which works in rural India, I think just listening to voices that were at the margins, and they have such innovative mechanisms, which of course we'll all speak about in the next segment. Are we scaling those up? Are we funding for scale? Are we investing in that, is what I want to ask. And as young women today, I'd like to hear more global calls for action to hold to account everybody who's responsible for this. You know, a lot of young people have been raising their voices. There have been fears and anxieties while raising their voices for gender equality. Are we going to defend them? Are we going to defend the human rights defenders, the women human rights defenders, the young people, as we continue in our fight for, you know, a gender just world? And to do all this, violence is not monolith. And how do we make the space for different contexts and different violence and not limit it? Of course, being very important, intimate partner violence, but not limit it. And look at state violence, look at structural violence, and build mechanisms to be able to address the same. And of course, monitoring and accountability, of course, is a big challenge. And I would request us to actually look at how we are doing the basic minimum with community voices in those monitoring and accountability systems. And community voices finally are linked to healthcare, linked to education and prevention and challenging social norms. So let's give young people the voice and the space to be able to challenge it. And as they say, it starts when you're very, very young. So are we investing in young children? Are we investing in a change of mindsets and giving that space in our economic policy to be able to actually invest in those things? Yeah. Thank you very much for allowing me to sort of speak on all of this and for foregrounding young people's voices.
Thank you, Jeevika. I mean, you raised all of the real issues, you know, as your panelists before you, but the way you asked the question, how do we reach the last mile? Now, I thought that was kind of optimistic because it suggests that we're almost there. And I'm not so sure that I will agree with you, but certainly.
Not at all. I think,
yeah.
No, not at all. I think we're not even 5% there. We need to do a lot more.
But I like the idea of the last mile because it keeps us hopeful and energized. But you are quite right. I mean, you're raising the point that a number of panelists before you have raised. Can we end gender-based violence when we have a robust system of gender inequality still constraining the lives of women, men, boys, and girls, when we have intersecting other forms of social inequalities? And I think that Anna Falu raised that as she began. So I'm now going to turn my attention to the questions, but we have a few questions from our audience. And I'm going to ask maybe Anna the first question, and then I think we can also kind of be interactive amongst ourselves and jump in. So one of the first questions is, how can we keep pushing for solutions to the problem of GBV at a time when there's so many anti-rights movements? And Anna, you spoke about fundamentalism and conservatism. Others have spoken about militarism. How do we do this work where the anti-rights movement seems to be quite strong? Over to you, Anna.
Bueno, se escucha, ¿verdad? Quiero decir de que, Roberta, que siempre nosotras hemos trabajado en las resistencias. Entonces, que en este momento crezcan los conservadurismos, los fundamentalismos, los movimientos antiderecho. Algunas pensamos que tiene que ver justamente por nuestro propio avance, por esa cantidad de jóvenes mujeres en todo el mundo, la muralla de mujeres en la India, las Ni Una Menos en Argentina, en Europa, en Australia, en todas partes del mundo. Entonces hay un momento de una épica feminista muy fuerte que por supuesto va a generar reacciones y montañas de dinero puestas por las fuerzas conservadoras para limitar y para poner trabas al avance de nuestros derechos. Siempre hemos trabajado en la resistencia, no nos asusta eso. Sabemos que con las voces de las mujeres en las calles tenemos una garantía de cuidar la agenda de nuestros derechos. No hay otra garantía. Ahora, casi todas las colegas han tenido contribuciones muy interesantes, porque necesitamos avanzar en el compromiso de los gobiernos y de la sociedad. Hay que cambiar las cabezas. Necesitamos más recursos. Necesitamos que la cooperación multilateral, que las agencias multilaterales estén muy comprometidas en poner más apoyo y más recursos a todas las voces, porque son todas necesarias. Las de las grassroots, las de las comunidades, como la academia, como la de los gobiernos. Necesitamos trabajar multiactoralmente, en intersecciones, Roberta. Como tú dijiste, si hay pobreza, si hay vulneración de derechos, ¿cómo hacemos para trabajar en las violencias de esas mujeres ya vulneradas en sus derechos? Entonces es un trabajo complejo y hoy las mujeres lo están colocando en esa complejidad, en esa interseccionalidad. Tenemos que ver en mi región, en América Latina, donde la diversidad es un punto central, donde están las mujeres afrodescendientes, las indígenas, las lesbianas, las jóvenes, etcétera, etcétera. ¿Cómo interseccionamos y damos cuenta de esas violencias que sufren estas mujeres, que son violencias sobre las cuales tenemos que trabajar, ¿no? Sobre los cuerpos. Entonces, a mí me parece que hay ejemplos, ¿no? Ejemplos.
Thank you, Anna. I wanted to ask Minister Mounyes, I think she's still with us, because she spoke about the importance of civic engagement. And one of our audience has asked, how can governments and development community ensure that they bring grassroots women and community-based organizations who are playing a crucial role in responding to GBV as equal partners and not just beneficiaries? How should governments be working with community-based organizations? Ambassador Mounyes, are you still with us? And if not, anyone who wishes to respond, please jump right in. How do we work at community level? Go ahead, Jeevika.
Yeah, I think just coming from a space where I've worked with communities and lived in a tribal rural community for 5 years, listen to the community women. They'll tell you how to speak about the social norms. They'll tell you how to access the justice system. They'll tell you where the gaps are, and bring that into your program. Bring them into spaces, into formal spaces in the program. Bring them into decision-making spaces. Allow them the space to be able to tell you how gender norms and violence can be spoken about. And we've seen programs like this in India. We've seen the National Rural Livelihood Mission, which is now investing in actually looking at gender-based violence coming to the forefront through community collectives. And I think it's very important to resource these spaces. And I can't emphasize that enough, because poor women can't do this on their own. And that's the last mile, which I speak about, the most marginalized. If we begin from them, then only we can reach the rest.
And that's the excellent point. I think none of this can be done without resources. And it's like the care economy. We take women's labors for granted, and we certainly take women's movement labors for granted and women's organizations. Norma, I want to ask you, because you spoke also a lot about how do we get involved at community level. What is your perspective? What are your needs? How would you say are the priorities for ensuring that women at community level have the resources and the voice to do their own work in their own name?
Creo que es importante, sigo con la idea que ponía Ana, de cambiar los enfoques. Necesitamos cambiar no solo que se escuchen las mujeres, sino que las mujeres estemos en los espacios de toma de decisión. Y que también se cambie el ejercicio del poder, que sigue siendo un ejercicio vertical y centralizado. Nosotros en México peleamos por el reconocimiento de nuestras formas de organización comunitaria, porque pensamos que el país y el mundo se construye desde lo local. Pero para eso necesitamos que se reconozca que tenemos esa capacidad de organizarnos y de resolver problemas, que podemos aportar mucho a la solución del mundo y, como decía, que no se nos deje en ese lugar de sujetas de atención, sino sujetas de derechos. Y como tales podemos definir hacia dónde, cómo queremos nosotras materializar nuestros derechos de manera colectiva. Pero eso significa que debe cambiar el ejercicio del poder. Si no se reconoce esto, aunque haya mitad del parlamento que sean mujeres, pero el ejercicio de poder sigue siendo el mismo, vamos a seguir a contracorriente.
Muy bien, muy bien.
Gracias.
Muy bien.
So you remind us that what we are really about is transformational change, a deep democratization in which gender equality is a defining feature of that democracy, but not just gender equality, other forms of social equalities that we have to be working towards. We are really running out of time. We only have, I think, about 12 more minutes here. And so I want to use those last 12 minutes to ask each of you, if there's one inspiration that you want to give us, what would that be? If there's one innovation that you want to recommend, what would that be? And I want to start, starting with you, Jeevika. What is that inspiration? You have 1 minute to give us something inspiring that we take forward, one recommendation on transforming the work that we do to make it more impactful to reach that last mile. What would that be?
I think, to me, it would be to adopt an intersectional approach and take it to all policy design, because we do have the mechanisms in place. Where we are still struggling is who we talk about when we talk about gender-based violence. And to be able to bring that as a cross-cutting initiative and intersection. And the second one, as many of the leaders from across the globe on this panel also said, is how do you also look at it in terms of, decision making and invest in the leadership which will bring the change for gender-based violence. And I think this is extremely crucial because we can't just keep plugging in the gaps. Survivors will speak. Survivors don't need support all the time. Some of them are strong. They lead their own struggles. It's for us to build greater spaces for them to have safe spaces and move on and actually change the environment. Yeah.
Thank you.
So intersectionality and leadership, and how do you integrate that in?
Excellent. Thank you, Jeevika. Faiza, what one thing would you want to recommend? You have 1 minute.
Well, the power of change lies in the minds and hands of the younger generation, who have the ability to mobilize and influence change, both within government, in their communities, and at, public at large. So I think we need to capitalize on their energy and passion to drive change towards a better future for girls and eventually women. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Faiza. Zaguna?
Well, I would say that from the disability perspective, I would like to say that we should not be discriminated on the basis of our disability. I think we have all the caliber to be a part of every policy-making platform, every decision-making platform, because it's all about us. And when the laws and the legislations has been passed for us and made for us, we should at least be concerned there. And I think you cannot bring a change on a larger scale when you don't have the policies that are exactly made for you and are implemented for you. So yeah, I would suggest that.
Thank you very much. Very important point. You can't make change at a large scale when you're being excluded. I think we all agree on that. Minister Mounyes? I'm not sure if Minister Mounyes is still with us. She's off camera. But Minister Mounyes, as we close off the panel, what would be the kind of priority for action that you would recommend for the consideration of the forum? Okay. I think we've lost Minister Mounyes. And so Ambassador Guivarra, the same question for you.
Yeah, thank you, Roberta. And again, thanks to the fellow speakers today. I mean, it really has been quite motivating to hear from obviously a range of speakers from civil society and government. If there is one issue that I guess just to take away is that underpinning, of course, all of this, the gender-based violence issue of, as I mentioned before, is inherent gender inequalities. And so if we are to address those gender inequalities, prevention. So an increased focus on prevention, I think, is something which is a longer term an issue. And so, of course, during the COVID crisis, we've been very much focused on provision of essential services, and that's an absolute must. But longer term prevention is really the key, and addressing these fundamental social and cultural norms to address gender inequalities is really, really important. Thanks.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think we would all agree on that. How do you balance the effective essential services with the prevention work that has to be done? And you don't have to balance them, you just have to do both and do both to scale. Juany, Garcia, from your point of view as the Youth Task Force in Guatemala, what do you think are the priorities? What would be the kind of one major recommendation that you'd want to make for the forum?
Muchas gracias. Definitivamente, yo insisto en la inversión. Considero que invertir en programas, planes e iniciativas que vengan a fortalecer las capacidades y liderazgos desde la niñez y juventud es muy fundamental, es muy vital para que las niñas y jóvenes continúen alzando su voz, se hagan consultas que surjan desde el sentir de ellas y en base a esas necesidades se implementen iniciativas, planes y proyectos que vengan a beneficiarlas. Muchas gracias.
So it comes back to being fully included and also being part of the decision making around the design of programs and monitoring of those programs for effectiveness and also for effective participation. I think that's a theme that we've heard over and over in the panel tonight. Ambassador Youngsook, we also have, I'm seeing, I want to acknowledge that there has been a question for you in the chat which you may wish to answer. But as we sort of wind down on the panel, what do you think would be the priority for addressing this shadow pandemic, as it has been referred to?
Yes, since the pandemic, 19, the COVID-19 pandemic, so the online someone raised the issue about the N-loom, so-called the dark web, sexual exploitation. It's a serious problem in Korea, and even though measures and legal strengthens it's higher and higher, it's never been stopped those behaviors and dark web cyber crimes. But so some say it's so pessimistic, and some say it's optimistic. We can respond and react. So I can say that we need to have some optimistic manner and approaches. Whether the cyber crimes and whether the gender-based violence never stopped, but the women's organizations and government can work together and collaborate together. And if there is a more support, and especially the financial support for the women's human rights defenders and feminist groups, then they can initiate to change the public awareness and the behavioral changes campaign. So we can you can finally eradicate, whether it takes some time, so we can wait and we can do. So I think I can suggest the optimistic.
Thank you, Ambassador Youngsook. Khodeja, for you, what are the priorities? What are your main recommendations for us?
Thank you. I think still we think that gender equality it is the future reality, and patriarchy, violence against women are obstacles. And these are not a local issue. This is not a Bangladesh issue. This is a global issue, global concern. So patriarchy must be addressed. Here, men are part of the problem, but men are also part of the solution. So I think more men should be engaged. At the same time, we have to bring changes to educational curriculums and leverage media to challenge stereotypes and patriarchy. Also, we need to be data-driven, use sex-disaggregated data, keep record, do analysis, address the gaps. At the same time, we need to invest more for inclusive and intersectional efforts to promote feminist leadership and to attain gender equality. So prevent all forms of violence against women and girls, stop patriarchy, the silent pandemic. And if we stand up, equality will step forward. Thank you.
Thank you for those inspiring words, Khodeja. And Norma?
Sí, creo que tenemos que avanzar en respuestas globales a problemas y necesidades comunes. Es importante que se deje de usar el argumento del crecimiento económico para impedir la protección de los derechos humanos específicos y colectivos. Por ejemplo, empresas extractivas que en sus países de origen cumplen con todas las medidas de protección ambiental y laboral, y en los países en donde vienen a explotar la naturaleza fomentan violencia, violan leyes y tratados para lucrar sin medida con todas las formas de vida. Creo que necesitamos, es urgente, trabajar por una ética global, intercultural y feminista. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Norma. And Anna, you started off saying you were an optimist, but you're not naive. As you leave us, what are those critical actions you think we ought to be taking or strengthening?
Do we have a translator? No? Yo diría, Roberta, que
I don't think so. I didn't hear the translation in the last one, so I don't know if we've lost
I think we need integral, intersectionality, and interactors, different stakeholders involved, and resources. We need much more resources and to work at the community level to understand that we need to modify, to transform the cultural and symbolic world of patriarchy. The transformation in the educative system with youth, with starting from very small in changing the representations, the social representation. So it's not only political will, it's transforming and having zero tolerance to violence, transforming the cultural patriarchal pattern. That's why we are so furious that they still continue to kill us, to harass us. So we need to really be mad at this and have much more demand. We are optimists because the people is in the street, the women are in the street, the demand is there. We need to feminize politics.
Thank you, Anna. I hope you can hear me, but I think we lost the interpretation because our time is up. This has been such a rich session and really too short, but we've all been doing this work for quite a long time and engaged with each other, and our dialogue and our exchange will continue. We'll continue over the forum and we'll continue over life. And some keywords: we need accountability, we need the political will, we need the inclusion, we need the intersectional analyses, we need resources. This work cannot be done without resources. And we need to affirm the women's movement that has been carrying this struggle over the last 30, 35 years. There's a lot to be done, but we've done a lot together. So let's go on, let's keep moving on, motivated with each other. The struggle continues. I want to thank all of the panelists. I would like to thank the government of Mexico for convening this forum and for allowing us to have this event, well, tonight or this morning, wherever we are in the world. Thank you very much, panelists. It's been very rich, and to our organizers, much appreciation. I think our time is up now.
Thank you very much to you, Roberta. A big hug.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone else. It was great listening to all of you.
Yes.
Ana, can you hear me?
Muchas gracias.
You.